I love the shitty days. I love the brilliant days. I love the stress, even though it becomes a bit, overwhelming at some point. I don't know. I'm one of those weird ones that I couldn't think of doing anything else, as hard as it is. It's intoxicating, and I love it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The food of Australia has changed dramatically over the last few decades as the influence of neighbours in Southeast Asia have woven a new web into the culinary landscape. The vibrant energy of Thai cuisine, for instance, has become an important part of the fabric of Sydney dining and continues to play a role in the evolution of Australia's dining landscape too. Annita Potter is a chef and owner of Viand in Sydney, New South Wales. Annita, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. You have really dived into Thai cuisine, but it wasn't what you started cooking all those years ago. What was it about Thai food and culture that really captivated you?
Well, from being from Perth never had, and it doesn't really have even now a huge Thai scene. It was, it's something that was much more on the east coast of Australia. So I didn't really experience much of Thai when I was growing up, and especially doing my apprenticeship and cooking and all that kind of stuff over there. So I knew of it, of course, knowing of David and what he was doing and all the chefs of the East Coast at that time. But yeah, I mean, the first time you have Thai food, I suppose, when you have never had it before, it blows your mind. And yeah, that's kind of, I think, what happened to me.
Before we dive into that incredible career that you forged in the realm of Thai cuisine, take us back to Perth when you were young. What was food like for you as a kid growing up?
My parents, my family was always into food. My background's Sicilian and Croatian, and we're all a bit of a mongrel race in our family. So food was really important. It was one of those things that, whilst eating any particular meal, you were always talking about the next one at the same time. What are we going to have for dinner? Whilst eating lunch. Big foodie people in our family. My father had gardens with all sorts of produce in it. My nonna and my nono, they too had produce growing, and yeah, it was a big food kind of family. Everyone cooked in our family. My father cooking some strange things. I think that's I took on cooking as self-defense at some point. There were some very, very strange and interesting meals that we kind of got fed. However, it also gave us these diverse palettes of try everything, and you can't say you don't like something unless you've tried it. So I think that's really kind of forged my understanding of food.
With that Italian and Croatian heritage, do you have any feasts or dishes that you remember from when you were young that you can tell us about?
My nonna made the most incredible, and I don't necessarily know whether or not it's a proper Italian thing or Croatian thing, but she used to cook this chicken spaghetti is what she used to call it, and it was basically a sugo that she would cook for literally all day. And there was chicken that was braised in it, so it literally just kind of fell apart, and the smell would just waft through the house all day. And we'd get our hands snapped if we were sticking a piece of bread into the pot and stuff like that. She used to make also these incredible dumplings, which are Croatian. They're fried off, and there's lots of booze in it, lots of raisin sultanas in them, grated apple, and then they've got this powdered sugar all over it, which were just divine. And I have a recipe somewhere. She gave it to me before she died, but I haven't cooked it for ages. Superb with a really thick hot coffee. Yeah. we had coffee when we were quite young. It could be the reason why I'm so hyperactive, I suppose, now.
Well, what was it like for you starting your apprenticeship and working in commercial kitchens, having grown up in that environment with food? Was it quite different in a commercial setting for you?
Totally, absolutely. And, back then it was, completely male dominated and driven, and it was tough. And the head chef that I had at that time was, how do you he was mean. Let's just use mean. I think mean could be the most polite word. He was tough. There was yelling, there was things being thrown, there was just, it was very, very tough. And it wasn't something that you can, kind of give someone heads up of at all. It's just kind of bear the brunt of it and survive or don't survive. Cooking at home with my family and then versus cooking at the beginning of my apprenticeship in a commercial kitchen, heavily dominated by a male brigade, was vastly different.
You've cooked all over the globe and had extraordinary experiences. And early on, you went to Europe. What did you take out of the experiences of cooking in Europe?
Cooking in Paris was great and difficult at the same time. I wanted to get out of Perth, and all of my friends and colleagues were going to London, and I'm a bit of that person of I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to pave my own way. So I decided that I'd go to Paris instead, not knowing a word of French or anything like that, not knowing what to expect. It was possibly the hardest year I've ever had, just because of I literally threw myself into the deep end of Paris of all places, which is a tough city to kind of survive in, and also not knowing the language and etc. But I don't know. The French are difficult to cook for. Here I am thinking I know how to cook green beans and that al dente kind of learnings that I had from my work in Perth, and the French don't eat beans like that at all, and they're usually cooked a little bit over, and they're softer, and so there were lots of things like that I was kind of I didn't really get, but I got it, and I picked up French, and it all clicked one day. Thank goodness. And I had a great time, but it was for the first 3 months I had my ticket in my hand going, what am I doing? I'm an idiot. Why didn't I just go to bloody London like all the other normal people? I don't do things by halves, I don't think.
You landed the head chef role at the kitchen in Paris. What sort of impact did that have on you and your approach to cookery and produce?
It was a great job. The guy who owned it was Irish, and his wife was French, of course, and he used to work for Guinness over in Ireland, and they moved to Paris, and they opened this restaurant. And it was it wasn't anything super extraordinary or anything like that, but it was just a really lovely bistro in the second arrondissement, and super busy, packed for lunch and dinner. I don't know. It was kind of paving the way of do I want to be at this level, or do I want to be at a different level? And I loved it. I loved the adrenaline of it. It was the first time I'd been in that head chef position. It was the first time I was able to call the shots to my own kitchen and my brigade, and it was a brilliant learning kind of curve for me to say, right, I want the kitchen to work like this. I want the people to kind of have this kind of vibe when they go into work, and I think that sparred me to continue at that level. I think that's what I got out of Paris the most.
What led to the move to Thailand? I know you came back to Australia for a period of time, but that leap to immerse yourself into Thailand and its cuisine, what triggered that?
I moved back to Australia, and with the intention of going back, I actually had a job in Umbria, Italy, set up and ready to go. But my mum was a bit ill at the time, so I just went to go and check in on her. And then the job in Italy, their funding fell through, so I didn't take it, obviously, and stayed in Perth, where I got back into contact with some people, and Ian Lawless at the time was doing some Thai things, and so I kind of started to see a different side of a cuisine that I didn't know anything about. So I think that's kind of what kept me in Perth doing that.
Tell us about those early days of discovering Thai cuisine, and does it require a different approach to ingredients and thinking about food?
It does. I mean, there are so many ingredients in one dish. I mean, and also so many levels of, in one recipe there's about, not all of them, but in one recipe there's usually several recipes within that recipe to create that one. And my brain just gravitated towards that. I need to be busy. My brain needs to be busy. Whereas cooking Western food, it's, there's usually 4 or 5 extraordinary ingredients. Thai food, there's about 20. And, it was that aspect that was interesting me the most. So this recipe then turns into that recipe that then evolves into this, that essentially, gets put onto the table, was just something I couldn't stop doing. And, David Thompson actually did a dinner at a restaurant in Perth. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, so he came over and did a dinner, and he was drying things on the roof, and he had brought all of these strange ingredients over from Sydney. I think it was then that I was like, I need to go and work with that person. He needs to teach me everything he knows. So yeah, I grabbed his email from Tanomsak, and I think that's where things went.
I want to delve into the influence and web that you created with David Thompson, which lasted for many years.
A web is a perfect description, I think. I think he would agree as well.
Alex's restaurant in Bangkok, you moved there to open that. What was it like for you culturally immersing yourself into that city and environment? Do you have any stories of that time and what it was like for you? It was through the contact of Ian that I went to open Alex's, and I remember he came with me for the first week or so, and I talk a lot, and his wife would call and just say, how's everything going, checking in, and he just kept telling her that I was very quiet, and that there was something wrong, and he didn't know what was going on. But I think I was so overwhelmed and so overloaded with these sensory kind of things and the culture, and it was so vastly different from anything I had ever experienced before, not only from a cultural point of view but a food point of view, how they ate things, how they interacted with people, just the whole thing. It was just like, oh my God, this is where I need to be. This is where I want to be. This is, it was full on, but in a good way. And I think I was taking it all in, not being able to articulate how I was feeling, what I was feeling, all of those kinds of things. So you mentioned the sort of fire in the belly that meeting David Thompson and that experience sort of gave you. You ended up working at NAM. How did that come about?
So I took his email from Tanomsak, his partner, and I sent an email saying, I'm coming to London. I'd like an interview for a job. I want to work for you. And so I basically banged on his door, and Matthew Albert, his executive chef at the time, was apparently forwarded this random mad email from this crazy chick in Perth. And he was like, okay, yeah, we'll do an interview. So I got on a plane and I turned up in London, and yeah, kind of had to kind of go, I don't know. I was just like, give me a job. I'm here. Give me a job. I want to work for you. Don't care what I'm doing. I need to learn. Give me a job. And so they did. At the time, I remember Matthew saying to me, he's like, I love your energy. I love all the things, but unfortunately we don't really have a position. And if you bear with me for a week, I need to convince the general manager of the hotel that we need to provide another position. To which they did, and I got the job the week later.
Wow. Well, take us into that kitchen. David Thompson, obviously renowned not only in Australia but across the globe. Do you have any stories of what it's like in that kitchen and sort of what you took from it?
Oh, it was a tough kitchen. It was a tough kitchen. The chefs who worked there were at the top of their game. It was that old school kind of, you turn up an hour early to your shift just because you loved your job and you wanted to kind of not be in the shit for service, so you'd get there early to make sure that you had everything. You'd stay afterwards after your shift and sharpen your knives every night on a stone. You would, like all of that kind of stuff. It was a kitchen that I'd never worked in, and at a level that I had never worked in, and with people at a level that I'd never worked with. It was amazing, and I think that in itself, kind of inspired me to kind of work like that too. I mean, it was basically a sink or swim kitchen, and I usually I don't know if I swam at the beginning, but I certainly floated, and then I got my feet and kind of ran with it. It was great.
Is there any dishes or ingredients or techniques that really sort of captured that period of time for you and sort of what you were learning about Thai cuisine at that time?
I remember David hated how I cooked a lon, and I'm not a sweet person, so my palate doesn't usually kind of go to seasoning something more sweet. I'm much more salty and spicy. And he still now kind of gives me shit for being too salty or what have you. But so I remember every time, so everything was tasted at every level, at every second, throughout the cooking process and all that kind of stuff. And he was, when he was in London, he was, sticking his spoon into everything and all. So my lons were, this cause of, you're not doing it right, this is not, you haven't got it, because I'd never put enough sugar in it. And I couldn't get my head around, putting that much sugar into something. Now I understand it, but and then, for want of, some kind of praise, I'd be like, oh, but what do you think of the naan prick that I made? And he's like, that's fine. He's like, we're not talking about that. It's your lon. And I was like, okay. But then because I was so nervous, and especially nervous around him when he was in the kitchen, he'd be doing things, but he'd do it at such a speed that, my small brain couldn't kind of keep up. And then he would basically kind of, do it all and then basically go, ta-da, and then go, see, that's how you do it. And I'm like, shit, can we do it again? So yeah, there was lots of those kinds of moments. I mean, David had apparently calmed down a lot by the time I'd got there. But yeah, he was still scary, and he'd pick up my knife and go, "It's not sharp enough. I want you to sharpen these. They need to be sharper tomorrow." And so you'd go home and you'd spend 2 hours sharpening your knives and stuff like that, only to come in the next morning and him turn around and say, "Did you sharpen your knives?" And I'm like, "Yes." All night. And this is like 3 o'clock in the morning after you've just done a 17 plus hour shift the day before. And so, yeah, you're just like, oh, I'm not cut out for this. This is not working. This is not working. This is, to the point where I kind of got to the point where I said to Prin, one of the executive chefs, at the time, I was like, Prin, you need to help me sharpen my knives because I'm clearly not doing it right. And so then there was a day that Prin sharpened my knives one evening, and then the following day, David, came in and said, "What, did you sharpen your knives?" And then I couldn't exactly say, well, I didn't, but Prin did, and he's your chef. And really, so it kind of became aware to me that he was just like, I don't know, he still to this day he loves taking the piss out of me, and I don't know whether or not it was a part of that or he was just entertaining himself at my account. But I don't know. But many experiences like that.
You veered away from the world of David Thompson for a little while. Tell us about some of the influences and experiences you had before joining up with him again.
So David closed Nam, I think 2012 at the end, and then he went back to Bangkok, and at that time Nam was being done in Bangkok. So still wanting to kind of keep me on his tab, Alan Yao was building a restaurant called Nam Ya in Angel, and it was really lovely. So when David closed the restaurant, he went around to all of the chefs and said, right, what's your plan after this? How can I help get you a job? I'm fully understanding that I'm severing ties. And then I remember he came to me and he said, right, where do you want to go and work? What do you want to do? What's out? What's your plan? And I was like, I don't understand this question. I just want to work for you. It's the reason why I came. And, now he's like, oh, okay. So he's like, right, I've got plans for you, but in the meantime, you need to go and you need to, I can't take you to Bangkok just now. So he was the one who suggested to go to Alan Yao. And the sous chef, one of the sous chefs at that time had gone. So he said, you'll still be working with Libor, who's an amazing chef. I think is now gone back to doing Japanese food in Dubai, but a scary Slovakian who I broke his nose one day in the kitchen of Nam, unintentionally, but he thought it was intentional. I think there may have been a small intent behind it, but yeah, it was almost like prison rules at that point. Before then, it was like no one really kind of I don't know, warmed towards me, and then all I had to do was break the sous chef's nose with a gastro tray, and then I was fine. So I worked with Alan Yao and Libor for I think it was about 8 months. And I don't know, it was just, again, it was street food. It was kind of an all-day dining concept kind of thing, and it wasn't really the kind of direction I wanted to go. And especially after working at Nam, I was so wanting to stay in that rhythm and that pattern. And so then I went down to the Begging Bowl in Peckham. And worked with Jane Attlee, who too was David's sous chef at one of the points at Nam, and she was doing food that was more refined, and it was also all Thai, whereas the Alan Yao place was a bit of a mishmash of everything. So yeah, there was just more care, and at the time Andy Oliver was working there too, who now has Samsar. So it was a better fit, I suppose. So yeah.
Long Chim was created not long after that and has had an incredible impact in multiple cities in different countries. Tell us a bit about Long Chim and the idea behind it and the success that it's garnered.
The first one was actually supposed to be in Hong Kong, but where Ahan is now, but because the space was the Jockey Club in the I can't remember what the precinct is called, but so yeah, it's an old heritage listed kind of big precinct in Hong Kong. There was some issues with the building itself, so a wall fell down and they couldn't replace it immediately because of the heritage listing and stuff. So Singapore came about up at Marina Bay Sands, and we were neighboured with Waku Gin, Tetz's place. It was a big project, and especially being the first one, there was a lot to kind of organise and do. But then timing for that was opening a restaurant anywhere in any country, timing is delayed, and this happens and da da da. So whilst it was delayed, I got thrown to an orphanage in Cambodia, in Battambang, which David still laughs about. And then, for probably 2 years later, my nickname turned out to be Orphan. But long term was, it was probably the first kind of thing of its kind, I suppose. Singapore was tough, just because the Singapore market is, from an eating point of view, we found that they didn't really kind of like strong flavours, and obviously David's food is all about the smack in your face big flavours. So yeah, the response was up and down, but then once it got on its feet, Perth was born, and then Sydney, and then Melbourne, and then Korea, and so forth. But yeah, I think everywhere that it was placed, it's done a really, really good job, and it's still successful now.
Given the big, bold flavours, were there challenges with the Sydney and Melbourne and Perth markets with Long Jim?
I can't talk much of Perth. I didn't do Perth. I was still looking after Singapore at its creation. But I think Perth, the response I think was quite good, and also because Thai food didn't really exist in Perth, it was a pretty great restaurant to have. In Perth, Sydney, it was always going to be tough. It's David coming back to Australia, his hometown, that kind of thing. The response was up and down, but it was I think too full on, especially from a heat perspective. I don't think people were expecting that. David staying authentic and keeping the integrity of everything, didn't really dull anything down, but it was tough. I think it was good. I think it's come a long way from where it began, and it's more user friendly, I suppose, for want of a word. But yeah, no, it was tough. I can only really speak about Sydney because that's the one that I spent the most time at. Melbourne, I didn't open. That was Matthew. Because it actually opened, I think it was about a month or two after we had opened Sydney, in the Crown Casino complex kind of thing. I don't know Melbourne very well, so so I don't know what the response really was from customers and things like that. But it worked for a little while, and then it closed for reasons that below my pay grade.
Well, cuisines all over the world are often westernized or sort of made more user-friendly in different environments. But what's your thoughts about Thai cuisine in Australia and its maturity?
I was told the other day by one of my suppliers that there's 700 plus Thai restaurants in Sydney alone, which I knew that there was a lot, but that number, threw me. Yes, Thai food has been adapted for the Western palate, particularly in Australia, and I think all of those kind of Anglo-Saxon countries, where all whether or not it's America or it's England or what have you, because people aren't used to the strength of the fish paste, the shrimp paste, and things like that. Lots of fermenting happens in Thai food, lots of curing and stuff, and just icky things to a farang. I think that's kind of probably, for it to work, it needs to be dulled down, I suppose. But I don't want to do that, and I don't know if that's going to shoot me in the foot. But it's the way I've been taught how to cook by someone incredible, and I want to stay true to what I've learned, and also the recipes that I've learned. Sure, there is adaptations with produce and things like that. Of course, I'm not in Thailand. I don't have access to all of those incredible things. The chilies are different here than they are over there in terms of heat, all of that kind of stuff. The peppercorns here aren't as explosive as they are over there. All of that kind of stuff. The herbs are not as strong. So yeah, there is an adaptation in terms of ingredients, but trying to stay as authentic, I suppose, to the original recipes as I can.
I know you spent a bit of time in Hong Kong as well, but tell us about the new restaurant and Viand and how did it come about?
I think the conception of Viand was something that was always in my head, although I don't know if it was necessarily this at the beginning thought process. I mean, it's one of those things, most chefs, some chefs, dream about their own restaurant, and I had the privilege of opening many of David's and seeing a whole different range of restaurants and how they opened and all that kind of stuff, and the things that I learnt along the way. I think the things that I learnt the most was the things not to do rather than the things that you should do. And it was when I finished with David, I needed to have a break, obviously, because I felt like I was running on adrenaline for the last 9 years, and just hopping countries and hopping suitcases and all that kind of stuff. When I stopped, it felt as if I had, this sea of balloons, and each balloon had its own idea and identity and da-da-da. And it was just a matter of pulling those strings down and collecting them into what I think is something that I've, kind of delivered in the restaurant space, and the concept and all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of what happened. So there's a piece of there are elements of all kinds of restaurants that I've worked in or eaten in around the country. Aspects of the concept of the dining or the open kitchenness, or the velvet curtains that you walk in through the door, the light in the kitchen. I don't know. All of those things play a part in this creation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe a dish or two to sort of exemplify sort of where you're at with Viand at the moment?
There's a salted duck egg relish on the menu with aged sticky pork. I'm getting my pork from Marcus down at Whole Beast Butchery, who just does the most incredible things. And I love the fact that he will only do whole beasts or whole big sides of things and that kind of stuff. And I love breaking things down in terms of that. So, but then the salted duck egg relish is something that most people haven't seen. It's funky. It's obviously made with salted duck eggs. It's got chilies in it. It's got roasted shrimp paste in it. It's seasoned with fish sauce and tamarind, and it's just something that people haven't seen, and eaten with all of the sticky pork and the vegetable plate that goes alongside it. It creates some diversity to what people think Thai food is, and I think that's most of my dishes are things that people can't recognise on the Thai restaurant around the corner, because I also don't want that comparison. Because it's not, and I know that I'm pushing a boundary with doing something completely different and trying to change people's perceptions about what they think Thai food is or should be. So it's partly the reason why I'm not putting things on the menu that people can identify, like green curries and things like that, papaya salads, and also it's a much more refined kind of cuisine. Not to say that a green curry isn't refined. Have a David Thompson green curry, and it'll blow your mind. But I just don't want to have the connotations of that wording on the menu. You know what I mean? So I think so I want to kind of keep my menu that's slightly obscure. And also this first couple, the menu will rotate. Once the kids and me get on our feet and kind of feel comfortable, there's a lot for them to learn in all sides and all aspects. But the dishes currently on the menu are things that have a particular memory attached to me And, you know, the first time I had the salted duck egg relish, I was blown away, just, you know, not knowing what salted duck eggs were, and that they were pounded with, you know, roasted shrimp paste that, you know, does give this real funk to it. The crab that I've got on the menu is also a dish that I learnt at Nam. I've modified it, and it's my interpretation of it, but it's still very true to its original form. And, you know, it's also, these things are small odes, I suppose, to David and what he's taught me, not ignoring, you know, my learnings from him, which I think is, you know, he's played a huge part in my professional career, and also how I cook and why I cook the way I do. So even though I'm trying to distance myself from him, not from him himself, but from his name, it's still, you know, playing a part to the background.
What's it been like for you creating and opening your own restaurant for the first time? Has there been anything that surprised you about the process and the experience?
I don't think there's a day that I haven't been surprised. It's an evolving surprise on a daily basis. It surprises me. Staff surprises, every single aspect surprised me. A lovely, brilliant surprise was the fact that I was able to work with someone who I can call now a dear friend, my architect, Abe Rogers, who's based in London. So we did this collaboration together with him not stepping foot in the building once, because obviously he's in London. And we both didn't really know how it was going to go, but we had this brilliant relationship and just had this incredible understanding of what we both wanted to come out of this. And I mean, that was a surprise. I think that was the nicest surprise I think that came out of this. There's been some horrible ones, like, you know, finding the grease trap. I mean, you know, when we took over the space, it was trashed, but, you know, we didn't really realize how trashed it was until you started, you know, opening doors and looking in the grease trap and just going, why is there sewage running in the grease trap? This is not normal. This is not right. And it's also bloody illegal. So having to, you know, fix that, and, you know, the electrical box was so illegal, and all of these things. And, you know, you want $70,000 to build my wine shelf. Is that really how much it's going to cost? So yeah, there were surprises, you know, at all moments. You know, it surprised us that Mark and I that we couldn't get any support by the government during the COVID thing because we didn't have revenue to fall back on. And, you know, we like probably many other people fell in this grey area that you know, didn't offer. They could only give this or this. And I get it, but, you know, there was us, like many others, that probably fell through the gaps and just had to suck it up and deal with it. So yeah, so surprises left, right, and centre. And, you know, there are still surprises now after we've opened. You know, there have been some brilliant tables, and there have been some horrible tables who have been horrible to staff and horrible to me and just don't get it. And it's just, yeah. I think that's all of the processes of opening a restaurant. Yeah.
What do you love about what you do?
All of it. I'm mad for saying it, but it's like I love the shitty days. I love the brilliant days. I love the stress, even though it becomes a bit, you know, overwhelming at some point. At the moment, I really love watching the staff, you know, kind of be in this very unique, different space to what they've been in before. I mean, the chefs in the kitchen are basically looking out to the street and looking out to the customers, and they also are serving the guests and explaining to them what they've created on the dish. Which is lovely. And then, you know, they get to also see the smiling faces the nods of, yeah, that's really good, of customers. I think that is also something I love. I don't know. I'm one of those weird ones that I couldn't think of doing anything else, as hard as it is. It's intoxicating, and I love it.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people in Sydney that are loving the fact that you are there now. Annita, we've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear just a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anthony.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.